transition of Bruce Jenner, the 7 most epic fails of all time, and the upcoming Suicide Squad film, all next on episode 27 of the Culture and Arts Podcast. Welcome to episode 27 of the CAP, the Culture and Arts Podcast. I am Joe Ruiz. With me, as always, is my good pal, Jason Merle. Jason, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, man. It's been a month since our last podcast.
Yeah, probably so.
Since the Tinder Mania edition, and that is because I took a family vacation, and then we had to just coordinate our work schedules when I got back, and so here we are. The CAP is still alive and well and plugging along.
Yeah.
But have you had a good month?
I've had a good month. Actually, part of the reason we haven't been able to get together for a show is I was out of town for a weekend. We had an anniversary party for my mom to celebrate the anniversary of her lung transplant. We had a very nice crowd show up, so...
That's cool. Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's really good to hear that she's doing well. She's well and on her feet, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Good. That's the year that all of that was kind of taking place. I know we were all really worried for her and praying for her. So it's really good to hear that she's doing well. Well, we've got a lot of content today, so let's get into it. Jason, you put together something. Let's do it in this order. We'll do your top 7 epic fails list that you prepared for us. Because that's a little bit on the lighter side. We might get a little bit deeper then into the Bruce Jenner transition story. He had his interview with Diane Sawyer last night, so it's kind of top of mind with the audience. We'll talk about that. And then Jared Leto's screenshot as the Joker from the new Suicide Squad film. We'll talk about that also. So it, we can have the deep stuff in the middle and then the light stuff kind of on the edges for everybody that doesn't want to hear the deep stuff.
I think that's the right way to do it. I have a list of some of the most epic fails in the course of human history, and I've always kind of been fascinated by the what-ifs in life, if things had played out differently. For example, we did a show once about actors who had turned down famous movie roles, and so I've always wondered, what if Tom Cruise had been Iron Man? That film's probably a lot more mediocre. Maybe we don't have the Marvel Universe that we have now.
Right.
I'm always fascinated by those kinds of things. So the 2 criteria I have on this list is some of these are things that are just routine mistakes that people make every day that somehow led to an event in history or some unintended consequence.
Butterfly effect.
Right. And then some of these are just mistakes that went unnoticed for centuries, and some of them I think would be big enough that you think somebody would have caught it.
All right.
So I'm going to start with this one, and I found this on several different websites. This is the wrong turn that led to World War I. Okay. Most people say the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand is what led to the start of World War I. Well, there are actually 2 attempts on his life that day.
Really?
Yeah. The assassins actually threw a bomb in his car. The driver managed to avoid it and get away. But later on, the Archduke wanted to go check on the people that were hurt. As he was going to check on them, the driver took a wrong turn and led him right back to the assassins.
Oh, wow.
So they pulled out their guns and they killed him.
So they got their chance anyway, huh?
Yeah.
Wow, that's wild. I mean, that's his compassion is essentially what killed him.
Yeah, in a sense.
It was beauty that killed the beast. Is that the old, what is that, King Kong?
It's from something.
Yeah.
I'm not totally sure how this fits in, but it does somehow, I'm sure. Pope Gregory IX, he actually made a decision that made it a lot easier for the Black Plague to spread through Europe and kill so many people.
Really?
Yeah, in 1232 AD, he actually decreed that cats were in league with the devil.
Wow.
And so people got rid of their cats, which of course increased the rat population.
Right.
So once the plague hit, it was a lot worse than what it probably would have been.
That's interesting. So yeah, there's no cats to kill the rats, and man, that's a pretty big fail.
Yeah, because I also said that it was worse in poor areas because a lot of the rich aristocrats kept their cats around anyway.
Interesting that Egyptians thought that cats were godlike,
right?
And here you have a Catholic Pope saying that they're of the devil. So I don't know, like, how do we decide these? Why is such a big part of religion dedicated to the spiritual nature of a feline?
Yeah, and I tried to find why exactly he was so against him, but I couldn't find that anywhere. But
maybe he had cat scratch fever.
That could be. Maybe he's just a dog person.
Maybe.
This one, Spain had their own map of California back in the day. They had actually incorrectly mapped California as an island for over 200 years. Yeah, basically the way the story goes, the explorer that originally charted the map as an island, almost as a rush just to get the job done.
Yeah.
And then he was killed before he could ever correct it. And it was basically such a huge landmass. Nobody, whenever anybody would find like a river or something, they'd just assume it was like the ocean. It's like, okay, yeah, this is an island. And then eventually, in 1776, an explorer by the name of Juan de Anza actually walked from Texas to California to prove that it was not an island.
Interesting.
And the thing I couldn't find, since it specifically says the Spanish map of California, I don't know if that means there might have been a French map that had it right or something, but... Now here's another one, another mistake that went unnoticed for centuries. In 1987, Robert Garisto was a student at, I believe, the University of Chicago. He actually found an error in a book published by Sir Isaac Newton. He published a book called The Principle, which actually became the foundation of calculus. So you'd think a lot of people have looked at that over the years.
Sure.
He actually found an error where in the formula to determine... It was a formula to determine the mass of the Earth, and Newton had used 10.5 seconds instead of 11 seconds. So he made a mathematical error that nobody had noticed until 1987.
Wow.
And even when he discovered this error, he assumed that his teacher was just trying to trick him. And so he took it to his teacher, and sure enough, basically the formula was right, he just put the wrong number in.
Wow. An episode of The Big Bang Theory that would relate to that, and I wonder if it was kind of based on that, but Sheldon came up with a theory that basically proved something in quantum physics that had never been proven. And at the end of the episode, come to find out after he'd done all these speaking engagements and he was going to have a book and all this stuff, that there was a mathematical error in his work. And so none of what he was saying was true.
Wow.
That everybody in the scientific community was getting excited about.
This one, and if we have any listeners in Des Moines, Iowa, I want to thank you for listening and wish you the best in your search for a new favorite podcast, because it might not be us after this.
Wow.
Des Moines is actually named after a Native American word for shithead. And the way this came about, there were some explorers walking along what became known as the Des Moines River. They asked a group of Native Americans what the name of the river was, and what they thought they had said was Moine, which they thought was the French word for monks. They thought that was an appropriate name, so they named the river Lemoyne, which became Des Moines, which led to the name of the city, which is now the state capital of Iowa. Well, in 2003, somebody actually discovered the appropriate translation, and what had happened was the Indians thought that they were asking who else lives along the river. And it was a rival tribe, so they said, what is their word for shitheads? And so basically Des Moines means shitheads, and nobody discovered this.
Unreal. And nobody cared, huh?
I guess by the time they found out, it was, too late to change the name of the city and the river.
Yeah. So the governor, as the head of state, would be the shithead of state. That's appropriate for politics,
yes,
I think.
Yes.
What's funny about that is I once knew a teacher who used to talk about the weird names that the kids in her classes would have. Mm-hmm. And one of the kids that circled through her classroom, his name was Shathid, and it was spelled shithead.
Oh, wow.
So, so they, Des Moines, that's much more poignant. They could have been Shathid, Iowa, if they were a little less creative.
Yes. At least there's a translation involved so people don't catch it right away.
Exactly.
Yeah, I wish David was here because he once told me a story. He met somebody. I don't know if it was like a friend of a friend who actually met or if he knows the person directly. But somebody met somebody who had named their child Lemongelo, spelled Lemonjello. Lemonjello.
Lemonjello. Wow. There was another one. I know we're getting off track here, but the name was Nazma King, and she asked the mom how she came up with the name Nazma King, and she said she was on her way into the hospital to deliver the baby, and she's all on all these epidurals and drugs that they've got her on to deliver this kid, and as she's entering the room, she sees a sign. Her baby's name was to be Nazma King. And looking at the spelling of the name, it would be no smoking.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Now here's one. This is a mistake I'm sure almost everybody's made. Somebody took home a set of work keys.
Okay. Yep. Done that.
That led to the sinking of the Titanic. Because the person on the Titanic that actually first saw the iceberg, he actually survived. And he testified to Congress that if he had had a set of binoculars, he could have seen the iceberg much sooner and avoided it. There just happened to be a set of binoculars on board, but nobody could get to them. The company that was running the cruise made a switch to their crew at the last minute, and the guy they sent home took home the keys to the locker that the binoculars were in.
Wow.
And by the time they discovered it, they were too far along to turn around.
Of all the things you've named so far, that might be the biggest epic fail.
Yeah, that's...
You hear stuff like that, and it's just like, oh, it was meant to be. Like one thing can set this entire work kind of in order. And, man, like that's the kind of stuff that, like Final Destination type stuff, you know?
Right. This is my last one, and I think the guys over at We Are Libertarians will enjoy this because this will really show how ineffective government can be.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
A mishandled press conference led to the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Okay. Tell me how.
Okay, and I just want to clarify, I'm not saying that the Berlin Wall coming down was by any means a failure, but it was not what was intended to happen. Basically, the East German government was holding a press conference, and they were announcing some changes to their travel laws, and it was basically just kind of an empty gesture. You know, the changes were never actually going to happen. They were, I think what it actually was, they're going to let people over 65 apply for travel visas so they could leave easier.
Sure.
But they were still going to get denied.
Okay.
You know, there was just kind of an empty gesture. Well, a man by the name of Gunter Schabowski, he was the one conducting the press conference. He didn't read the papers he was given.
Okay.
So he's kind of overstated the laws that were being changed. And so the reporters are kind of like, wow, this is kind of a big deal. And so they asked him, well, when is this supposed to start? And again, it was never supposed to actually start. So he kind of glanced at the papers, didn't see a date anywhere. So he said, immediately. So everybody was like, oh my God, we can leave. So they rushed the wall. And the soldiers at the border were like, do we fire? But there were just so many. They're just like, yeah, let them go.
Wow.
And so the wall came down.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Nice little, that's a nice little error. Like I said, butterfly effect. It's interesting how one little thing can make such a big, you know, like if the guy hadn't left his keys, or if he hadn't taken his keys, then James Cameron, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Kate Winslet wouldn't be rich household names, right?
Right.
So that's interesting. Bruce Jenner, he's been a tabloid darling for a very long time now, and by darling in tabloids, that doesn't necessarily mean a good thing. It's, you know, often it comes from a place of mockery, misunderstanding. You know, you're doing something stupid. But this is a little bit different of a story than Lindsay Lohan. This is a person who is identifying himself as the opposite gender. He, you know, even though he has the appearance of a male, has always identified more with a female, and now it's a person coming out of the closet. So he had his big Diane Sawyer interview last night, which was, you know, a chance to hear his words, and it's a chance to, or sorry, I should say her words, to come out of the closet, so to speak. Now, yesterday, Glenn Beck did a brief segment on this, where he basically just said, why do I care? You know, I mean, if that's who Bruce Jenner is, if that's who Bruce Jenner, you know, then what business is it of mine?
Right. Which
is kind of, I mean, where I think that most people should be. It's, you know, that's the way that Bruce Jenner feels, then that's what Bruce Jenner is going to do with her life. And, you know, it is what it is. But there is like another thing that he said that kind of resonated, where he was like, it was something like, and I'm paraphrasing, I don't truly understand the whole transgender issue, the whole transgender concept, the idea that somebody can identify with being something that they're not to the rest of the world. And he's like, I just don't get it. He's like, but it's okay that I don't get it. He's like, but the problem is that in today's society, because we're very protective of certain ideas with these social issues, he's like, that we're not even allowed to have the conversation, or we're not even allowed to ask questions, because we're afraid that if we ask questions to get a better understanding about something, that we will be, tried as a bigot. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's true. So first, I wanted to get your take on the Bruce Jenner thing, and then I wanted to interject with a little bit of a personal story also.
Okay. I didn't get to see it, so I'm kind of judging by the reaction I've seen from other people, largely on Twitter. Mm-hmm. And basically, if this is what Bruce Jenner needs to do to be happy, then by all means.
Right.
And I did see, I believe it was ABC News that actually tweeted out afterwards that Bruce is asked to, he's still going to go by the name Bruce for now, and he said he would wants people to refer to him as him as opposed to her, at least for the time being. And it's like, to me, that's kind of that's where it gets uncomfortable for me, just because I don't want to say the wrong thing and offend somebody.
Right.
And I guess, and a lot of people are singing his praises, and I guess the only joke you can really make is, is it still okay to hate the Kardashians?
Oh, I think that this does absolutely this disqualifies no Kardashian hate.
Okay, yeah. Yes. Or this just separates Bruce a little more. Okay.
Yeah. Well, if anything, I mean, to be completely fair, it should probably position him as just another Kardashian woman to dislike, and I think he would find that fair.
Well, I did read somewhere that I guess Kanye had made a statement to Kim that kind of helped her accept all this, as far as, everyone has a right to be happy, I guess that kind of thing. And it's,
right.
You're just not used to seeing, Kanye, with like class and sensitivity, but
a defender of something like reasonable. And so months and months and months ago, I had a very good friend, best friend, come to me and come out and say that he was in the same position as Bruce Jenner. And as you can imagine, for me, like not having a real grasp or real understanding of just kind of like Glenn Beck said, of anything as far as like what does transgender even really mean? That was really tough, man, as to know somebody for 20 years and then all of a sudden they're telling you, hey, like this isn't who I am. I'm, it is who I am, but I'm also something else, and I need to embrace that. So it was very difficult, and I think, there was a lot of things going on in my mind at the time. There was, the idea of, like, from a friend's perspective, it's how can I be supportive? How can I be encouraging? How can I accept this? Because you don't want to be that guy who just, like, writes off a relationship that's been so strong for so many years because, there's something new that's being introduced into it. Then there was the parental side of me that was asking the question, well, how do I present this to my children when they start to see, their, uncle essentially going through this transition over the next year or so? How do I explain that kind of thing to two small kids? Because I didn't even really know how to explain it to myself. And then the other thing was like, as a friend, like I didn't want to get it wrong. Like, so like I had to sit down with my buddy essentially and just be like, look, I support you and I encourage you, but you're going to have to give me a little bit of grace here because like to not call you by the name I've always known you as is going to be difficult for me to say, because when I talk to guys, it's often, yeah, man. And to leave man out, right? Not that I would be like, yeah, girl, but just to try and tweak around those like little built-in things that are part of my words, that I use on a daily basis. And then there was that other part of me that was like, well, then what's like off limits? Because guy to guy humor can be very different from, and I've told him things in the past, and just like made random statements to him that, are definitely something that you wouldn't say in front of a lady,
right,
or something like that. So does a transition to womanhood or becoming a woman, or whatever, does that mean then that all of the territory comes with it, or do you just continue to treat this person as you've always treated them? It's this very like fine balance of like, well, what's really changing, what's new, and what's going to stay the same, and all this stuff. And all I can really say about it is it's something that is, I think her preference would be that I continue to always, carry the relationship as it always has been.
Right.
And so that's what I'm trying to do. But then there's that like instinctual part of me that's like, well, but you don't want to be disrespectful, and I don't know. So I guess, with Glenn Beck saying we can't even ask questions, we can't even have a conversation, he means because his show is very politically viewed.
Right.
And so an issue like transgender people becomes a political issue in the minds of the right audience. Like for me, just bringing it down to kind of this personal level and telling this story, for me, it's kind of like, well, it's not really that you can't ask questions, because the fact is that you have to. Like, you have to ask questions. And the key is just don't be a dick about it.
Right.
But, I mean, even though it's a change for the person who's making the transition, for the people who have loved them and cared about them and who will continue to support them through that, it's a huge change for them too. And so it's like, how can you not have conversations? How can you not ask questions? And the entire thing is a transition for everybody, and it is a work in progress. So, in terms of circling back around to Bruce Jenner, this is part of who he feels that he is. And even though you don't know Bruce Jenner on a personal level, and so there's an opportunity to take the door that's just like, I don't care, I don't know that guy. The fact is that it's something large scale that, I'm speaking from personal experience, could happen to anybody.
Right.
And you could be in a situation like this just as easily. So think about how you would feel and how you would handle that kind of situation. What kind of questions would you have? And would you be the kind of person that walks away from that relationship, or would you be, what I choose to be, which is an encouraging and supportive friend, as long as she can be as patient with me throughout the process, because I'm nothing if not ignorant of the whole thing. So I'm doing my best to learn. But
I have nothing to add. I think you hit it right on the head there. That's...
A lot of talk. Sorry. Okay. So moving on from that stuff, give us your feedback on the Cat Facebook page and Twitter, how you would handle the situation. And if you have anything to add about what was said, we want to hear your thoughts too. It shouldn't just be me rambling all the time. But let's get into something a little lighter. Suicide Squad. All right. Talk about the Jared Leto photo.
I've kind of questioned if it was a right move for DC to even make a Suicide Squad movie.
Yeah.
Because it kind of has a cult following, but
I never knew it existed.
It's not really a mainstream thing. Some of your real diehard comic geeks will like this, but I was starting to come around and get excited for it because it's like Will Smith's going to be in it, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Jared Leto's a good actor, so him playing the Joker will be cool. And all of a sudden, they released this photo yesterday.
Okay.
And
it sounds like you didn't like it.
I didn't really like it. And it's not that it was bad. It was just, he's all covered in tattoos and stuff, so he's really going to be a psychotic Joker, which is fine. It's just more the direction they're going in general. It kind of it's just a reminder that this is kind of the Zack Snyder DC world, even though he's not directing the movie. And I understand that this is going to be kind of a villains group, kind of playing the heroes, but there's still an element where you got to root for them, and I don't know that this is the way they're going.
So when I saw the picture, it took me a minute. I looked at it, and I looked at him, and I thought, wow, that looks really crazy. But then I thought, if you if the last person who played the Joker was Heath Ledger's Joker,
mm-hmm.
and that part was, iconic.
Right.
And then he died, and it was essentially the legacy that he left behind.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you're coming up and picking up this character that not only has his legacy attached to it, but also has been performed by someone like Jack Nicholson,
right,
who's also an iconic person.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what do? You can't one-up either of those guys.
Right.
So to me, it's like you have to make this character completely your own, completely different, and you have to come at it from a different place than either of those two came at it with. So when I looked at it, he looked more cartoonish. It looked more animated to me, like something that would come out of like one of the Batman cartoon series or something like that. Do you get that at all?
I mean, to me, I get what you're saying about they're going a different direction. So, I mean, this clearly isn't Heath Ledger's Joker.
No.
And
who was almost like you could like a real psychopath,
right?
Like even though he was wearing makeup and everything, like this is somebody who's disturbed that you could see at the psych hospital,
right? I don't know. He was just covered with tattoos, and I don't know. I wasn't impressed.
This to me was the Joker meets punk rock, like Sex Pistols.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is,
and I think that's very suiting of Jared Leto's personality.
Definitely.
So I'm not writing it off. I'm not giving up. I don't know anything about it, but if Guardians of the Galaxy taught me anything, it's that just because I don't know the characters and I'm not familiar doesn't mean it can't be awesome.
That's true.
And the only thing that will really be a hill to climb for me is sympathizing with people who I've always known to be bad,
mm-hmm.
because they're going to have to find a way to make the main characters likable.
Right.
And the only other thing that I can really compare that to is like the Star Wars prequels, where you're sympathizing with Anakin, even though you know he's going to turn into an a-hole down the road.
I guess I'm thinking more like Young Guns or something, where they're criminals, but they're still the heroes of the movie, that kind of thing. But
well, I mean, that's what Guardians was, kind of, but
there's an element of that. But
okay,
yeah.
So we won't write it off entirely, and we'll kind of see what developments take place. I'm interested to see what Will Smith's character looks like.
Yes.
Will Smith's career needs a win.
Yes.
Because he's had a lot of L's lately.
It's been a while since he's had a hit.
Yeah. I mean, After Earth bombed.
Mm-hmm.
He had one just recently that came out. Was it Focus? Was that what it's called?
Mm-hmm, I think so.
Haven't really heard anything about it.
Nope.
I know that it didn't do as well in the theaters as they wanted to, and so there was a lot of questions about, is Will Smith's time in the sun over?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe this Suicide Squad will, give it the resuscitation.
Yeah, but I was just kind of disappointed in the picture, because it just reminded me that this is Zack Snyder's dark DC universe that's not a lot of fun.
It's not. Well, but, okay, if you're DC, don't you have to contrast what's happening in the Marvel universe? Because that's very fun.
I almost think they're just being contrarian for the sake of being contrarian at this point.
So you think it could be done similar, but with different characters?
Yeah.
Man of Steel could have been better.
Yes.
But I don't think it was because it was too dark. I thought it... The reason that I thought Man of Steel was bad was because of the action sequences. I thought they were too quickly shot and too crowded and too long and drawn out, and it was like too much of the movie was dedicated to something that my eyes were seeing, but was so fast that my mind couldn't process like what I was watching, and it was just a bunch of property damage, and rooting for this character, and like so I'm hoping that Batman versus Superman is different, and I don't mean lighter, because the trailer looks cool to me.
Yeah.
But I just mean have a little bit more depth to story, because Man of Steel was very choppy. It was trying to catch you up on his entire story while also giving you this grand cinematic, like, he had the action on Krypton at the beginning,
mm-hmm.
and then you have action with him fighting General Zod at the end. And then like what was going on in the middle was just like these little frame by frame trying to catch you up on the origin of Superman kind of thing,
mm-hmm.
when really that should have been the whole film, and it took you through maybe what should have been 2 movies in 1 movie. I don't know. That was my take. But this next one could be what number 1 should have been, and I feel like introducing Batman and then introducing everybody else that they're throwing in the movie, it could be good.
I would just, because like with Man of Steel, there's a lot to like, there's a lot to not like.
Yeah.
So to build an entire universe off it, to me, it's a little questionable.
Because there's so much to not like?
Right.
Okay.
Where, especially, and a lot of it is the tone of the film.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a fun movie, and it doesn't, and they've just gone so far the other direction that it worries me.
Okay.
But at the same time, later on down the road, when we do have a full Justice League film with everybody involved, I can see where a more serious tone would pay off more than the first Avengers that was just a ton of fun.
Yeah.
So I can see where it'd pay off down the road.
But the thing about and we're going over time, but it doesn't matter. The thing about it is, it's not because Henry Cavill as Superman is not likable. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, all of the Marvel characters right off the bat were very likable.
Right.
Except for maybe Thor, but that didn't last very long.
Right.
And, and Henry Cavill, Superman is supposed to be like that super likable character, but he's kind of Hulk Hogan. He's like the fans eventually turned on him because he was too good. Like, he was too nice. Mm-hmm. And so this Superman, because we live in a day and age where, to use wrestling to kind of reference, I guess, like, people are more fans of the Stone Cold Steve Austin, like the bad guy that they want to root for.
Right.
And so to have a little bit of a darker component, like, kind of makes sense if you look at it the right way. But ultimately, characters like Batman and Superman should be likable no matter what.
Right.
But I don't know, man. Like, Aquaman, the shot that they released to him, is unlike any Aquaman I've ever seen.
Right.
But it looked cool.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see how it goes. Wonder Woman looked hot.
Yeah.
If nothing else. Like, so we'll see how that plays out. But there's just I guess there's a part of me that really just wants to be optimistic and give it the benefit of the doubt and, like, hope that it's awesome and that, I can be proven wrong about Ben Affleck and whatever.
I agree with all that. I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be a good thing.
Yeah.
All right, so before we wrap this up, let's go ahead and tip the cap for this episode, and then we'll wrap up the show.
I just want to tip my cap to Chris Spangle for letting us continue the show after we had fun at his expense in our last one. So,
Jason is referencing episode 26, Tinder Mania. Go back and listen, and you can tweet at Chris Spangle. That's SPANGLE. To let him know how hilarious it was that we were able to joke at his expense.
Yeah, I think that covers it. So,
all right, I am tipping my cap to I guess it would be to Shonda Rhimes, the creator of Grey's Anatomy, for breaking the hearts of America this week. I mean, they killed off Derek Shepherd. Spoiler alert: Patrick Dempsey's character, and the whole show from episode 1 was based off of this couple, Meredith Grey, Derek Shepherd. The reason I know about this, and you're going to judge me, the reason I know about this, I started watching it with someone I dated before I got married, and I'm very completist. We've talked about this before. If I start a show, I have to finish a show, and it's like one of those shows that just won't go off the air.
Right.
But now because they just keep throwing in new cast members and building new stories, and then it's like a totally different show at the other end, but still under the same umbrella, kind of like ER was. But hey, here we are in the situation where they kill Derek Shepherd, and I'm just thinking to myself, Meredith Grey has had the shittiest time on this show, this character. She comes in, and she's already kind of a jaded person, I guess. She's interested in surgery. She's a resident at this hospital. Her mom was like the greatest surgeon ever, so she's already living in her shadow, but her mom was also kind of a pain in the ass, and she died, and she had dementia at the end and all this stuff. And then she finds out while she's like trying to learn more about her mother that her mom was also like a cheater and had cheated on her father and all this. And it's like, well, that sucks. And then out of nowhere pops the sister that she never knew existed, and it takes her a long time to warm up to her sister, but as soon as she really warms up to her, sister dies in a plane crash. Like what are the odds that would happen? Mm-hmm. Then they introduce this other guy who becomes a good friend to this little core group of characters. He's great, dies in the plane crash too. And then she gets married after all of these abandonment issues and everything are kind of, given a little bit of closure, and she marries this guy. Now he dies in a truck accident. Well, he gets hit by a semi, and then he dies on the operating table at a hospital that didn't have a trauma center. And it's just like, what are the odds that a brain surgeon would end up dying because he needed brain surgery and there wasn't a brain surgeon to tend to him, And now she has another sister who appeared out of nowhere, who's a black woman.
How many times can that happen in a lifetime?
I'm telling you, man. Like it's just like she has been through the ringer, and it's appropriate because Ellen Pompeo looks like she's aged a lot since the show started. Mm-hmm. But like a person in her situation definitely would, so it matches the character pretty well. She's had every bad thing happen to her throughout the character, not the actress, during the course of the show. And so, Shonda Rhimes, you broke everyone's hearts. And when I finished that episode, I just had to turn and look at my wife, who's reading a book, not watching the show, and just look at her, because not in disbelief, like, holy cow, they just killed this guy, but like, I just needed that moment to appreciate that I'm laying next to my wife after this character suffered this yet another great loss. And it's just ridiculous. So Shonda Rhimes, you did what I guess you set out to do, which was make everybody sad.
Okay. Well, I won't judge you for watching Grey's Anatomy. I've only seen one episode, but it does sound very much like ER, which I was
soap opera.
I was heavy into ER for a long time. So.
Okay, it's a total soap opera.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's almost embarrassing to say that I watch, but it's just because I'm a completist. And so the other part of that is I'm still waiting on Shonda Rhimes to bring me in as the long-lost Hispanic brother of Meredith Grey. And you can kill me in whatever fashion you'd like, within the next year or so.
Let's make that happen.
Make it happen. Always trying to get me acting jobs, even though I'm not an actor on this show. So whatever. All right. And so tipping the cap to Shonda Rhimes, and you tip the cap to Chris Spangle. And we will wrap up the show that way for episode 27 of the Culture Nerds podcast. Thank you for being here, and we tip the cap to you.